You can cut it, paste it, erase it. You can be the change if you make it. You can cook it, sew it, or fake it if you're like-minded. Welcome to Like-Minded, where I conspire to inspire you. One of my favorite things to do is take something and give it a new life. This is the perfect project for the beginning sewer or the more advanced. I came up with the greatest idea using a vest that I found at the resale store. I hope you come along and get invested in this idea. Every crafter class starts with a clean workspace. You know the drill. Before we create, we educate. The word apron comes from a French medieval word, an apron. An apron was a small cloth placed over a large cloth. The word first showed up in the English language in the 14th century as a cloth placed over clothing in order to protect it. It was often confused with the word an apron, and by the 17th century, that is what people started calling it. They were very functional and were worn primarily to protect clothing of women who didn't own very many dresses. It was easier to wash the apron than it was to wash an entire dress. In the 1940s and 50s, aprons became a symbol of domesticity, and TV housewives wore them to care for their perfect TV families. Aprons for men, on the other hand, were confined to outdoor grilling and barbecue pits. They were considered more masculine, whatever that means. But because you're like-minded, no matter how you identify, you know that fashion is not gender specific, and you can put the fun in functional. For this project, you're gonna need a vest that you're not wearing anymore, or one that you found at the resale store. Fabric, an apron that you have hanging around, measuring tape, thread, scissors, fabric ones, and a sewing machine. I'm going to start by using this apron that I had laying around the house. I wasn't really using all that much, but I'm going to use it as my pattern today. That's the easiest part about this, is we don't have to make a paper pattern. We're just going to fold our apron that we already own in half, and then we're going to cut it. We're going to cut our fabric using this as the pattern. You want to make sure that the fold of your apron is lined up with the fold of your fabric. I want you to fold your fabric in half, lengthwise, and match up both folds, because when you open it up, you want to have like a whole apron. So you're really just cutting the outer edge. You're not cutting this. And you're not ruining your apron. You're still keeping your apron intact. Now, if you have a fabric apron, you're going to want to pin it down, but I have a heavier faux leather apron, which I won't need to pin it down because it's heavy enough and stable enough to stay in place. So I'm going to skip this step for me. And if you want to make your apron shorter or longer, this is the time to do it. So if I want mine exactly the same length as this apron, but if I wanted it longer, I could cut it down here. If I wanted it shorter, I can just, fold my apron up and then use that as the guide. However you want to customize it is up to you. Okay, there we have it. I cut out my apron piece. We don't need this anymore. We just put this aside. After you fold it out, this is what you should be left with. Now, I want to explain to you that one of my inspirations for doing this project was I noticed that the curve of an apron armhole is the same, pretty similar as a vest curve on the armhole of a vest. So I can easily match those two up, and that's what makes this project super simple. I'm going to start by cutting the back of my vest off. We don't need any of the back. We're just going to use the front of it. I'm cutting the back off this vest because the back has been a very bad boy. Cut that off like that. It's very satisfying. If you've ever wanted to cut the back off a vest, this is your opportunity. Open that up and we're going to cut off those shoulder parts. Toss that aside. So all we're going to need is this front part of our vest. One of my favorite parts of design is seeing how things organically change as you go about a project. I started out thinking this was just going to be about a vest and an apron, but I decided how cool would it be to add a shirt. The effect would be essentially a faux outfit in the form of an apron. So I'm going to show you next how to fillet a shirt and add it to the vest. I'm going to take this shirt and I'm going to cut the sleeves off, and I'm going to cut about that much off the front, and I'm going to cut across the yoke here on the back because that's the only part of the shirt that I'm going to need to use. And you thought an egg was the only thing with a yolk. And this is what you're left with. It's kind of a dickie kind of a thing. If you guys know what a dickie is, and if you don't, it's like a faux shirt. And that's what we turned that into. And then we're going to add this vest right on top of it. So look what happens. So it's going to look like that kind of, but we're going to trim away the excess. We're going to sew these together. So you want to turn it over, match up those shoulders, and pin these together. You want to line up your shirt buttons with the buttons on the vest. Make sure those are straight and lined up before you pin it. We've got our shirt pinned to our vest. And as you can see, I've pinned the inner vest, the V. I've pinned the two shoulders. And I've left a little overhang of my vest fabric because we're going to fold that and make it look more finished. And we sew it down, and then I pinned the outer armhole curve of my vest to the shirt as well. Now we're going to sew it down, and afterwards we're going to trim off this extra fabric that you see from the shirt hanging over right here. Bring back my sewing machine. I've sewn all my edges, and now I'm going to trim off this extra part here. All right, and that is what you should be left with before we sew this to the apron. The next thing you want to do is turn your fabric piece over that we cut, the apron shape. Turn it over, and we're going to pin a little hem allowance here. I like to turn it over just 1/4 of an inch and then fold it again so you have a nice finished edge. I've got all my edges pinned, just the sides, not the top part, but just the sides and the bottom, and now I'm going to sew it. We're now at the place where I've sewn all 3 edges of the apron foundation piece, and we're going to take our vest and shirt layer piece that we already sewed. We're going to put it over the top. We're going to position it where the shirt collar is at the top of the apron and our sides are matching up with the sides of our apron. And we're going to pin it down and sew it together like we did the shirt and the vest piece. So all 3 pieces will be sewn together now at this point. The great thing about design, once again, is that you can really do whatever you want to do to finish off the piece. And one thing that I like to do is consider what's possible right here in the neck area on something like this. So you can put a bow there, you can put a pin there, you can put anything that you want to kind of finish off. You can leave it plain if you want, but I like to give it a little more personality. So I'm going to probably put it like a bow there, and I might want to entertain doing contrast stitching around the edge of my vest too. So these are some design elements that you can elect to do or not do. You can put trim around the edge. Just use your imagination. It's what the point of this is, and you really put your stamp of design on it. This is what I'm going to do, but you do you. And I'm also going to trim off this little extra part of the apron so that all you see is that nice clean edge from the vest. I'm going to make mine 40 inches, which is the length of my entire apron. And I find that that works out pretty conveniently since I already have this narrow strip of fabric left over from cutting out my apron. You may want to make yours longer just depending on your size, but 40 inches works for me. So I have my 2 pieces here, and what I need to decide is how wide I want my straps to be. And that just depends on if you like a big size bow when you tie it or a thin bow when you tie it. So I think you got to think about if you're going to put it in half, so that's going to be the width. If I stay with this fabric width that I've got here and fold it in half, this is how wide my tie will be. And so minus the seam allowances. So for me, I think that looks pretty good. I like a big bow, and I cannot lie. Making straps is super easy. Once you've decided the length and width of your fabric pieces, you want to put right sides together, and you want to sew all the way down the length of your fabric. After you've done that, you want to turn it right side out so you have a tube basically. and then you want to press that. I don't even have to pin this, but you can if you want. This apron will look so cute on you. Now, who doesn't love a strap on their apron? You want to turn this inside out, or right side out, I should say, so we see the print. And that takes a second, but just kind of pull that through. Do that to both straps. And then after you have it all pulled through, it's up to you if you want to press it or not. You can. I like to. And it should look like this, kind of like a tube. We've got both of our straps made. Now, if you don't want to press this, what I would recommend you doing is sewing down both edges all the way down. Sewing them, and you can do it with a decorative stitch if your sewing machine has that feature, or just a plain stitch, but just to kind of flatten it down and make it more of a strap-like thing instead of like a tube. We don't want it to be fluffy. We must attach the straps, but before we do so, we want to figure out or decide which end is going to be the finished end of our strap. And so when you decide that, you want to fold in the ends like that and sew that down. And on the other end, you want to just fold it in half like that, make it even half of what it was, and that's what we're going to attach to our apron. This is the end that I'm folding in half. It's my connection point to the apron. Now that I have them pinned, I'm just going to sew that down. I'm going to take my fabric scissors and do a cut right down the middle. Just have two pieces. And then I'm going to pin this all along the top of the shoulder of the shirt. We've gotten all of our shoulder supports sewn on and all the loose threads trimmed off. Next, we're going to attach our Velcro pieces, and we want to make sure that these pieces are trimmed to the width of these straps here. These are going to interconnect and give us that finished collar look. Okay, we've got the width that we want. Now we want to make sure that this is attached right up next to the edge of the collar, or the back of the collar, and it goes on the outside. I find that fascinating. I'm pretty proud of this, so I'm gonna go try it on. I don't know, you guys, I think this apron has got me pretty inspired to cook up something for next episode. I hope you were invested in this episode, and I can't wait to see what you do. So tag me at LieckMinded, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you like what you saw. And remember, nothing's off limits when you're like